Hey everyone, if you just want to get straight into using my newest favourite bass tone, then there's a link down in the description where you can download it right now and get started with it right away. Otherwise, stick around to hear a little bit more about it. I've been recording and producing tracks with the electric bass for about 7 years, and in that time I have regularly changed my signal path. I almost use a different set of effects for every single track that I work on. Now this does have its benefits. It's fun to constantly experiment and tinker around with sounds, and it's also good to have a tone that is tailor-made for each track that I work on. But a few years ago, I started to feel like this was a little bit of a waste of time. I wanted a go-to tone that I knew would A, sound good, and B, sound like me. I wanted to have a signature tone. So I started to tinker and experiment with sounds, and then I would save each effects chain that I made to use in future projects. I would dial in everything the way I wanted it, and then I would save it to recycle for later use. But I found that I would come back to these old sounds, these old effects chains, I would have to re-tinker with them again and again to make them suit the newer songs that I was working on. But a lot of the time I would just start from scratch again, make a new chain, I'd be happy with it, I'd save it, and then 6 months later I'd replace it again. And this kept happening about once every 6 months. What I realized recently was that part of the reason that I needed a new effects chain so regularly was because I wasn't cleaning or changing my strings frequently enough. A tone that sounded good 6 months ago on fresh strings was not going to work now on old dirty strings. And it also doesn't help that I rotate between 3 basses depending on what song I'm recording for. For the past 6 months, I've been using this stuff. Dissolve It, to keep my strings clean and fresh, and my tone is definitely more consistent. And consistently better. So I wanted a consistent effects chain that would match the more consistent sound I'm getting out of my strings. I listened through my backlog of recorded music, and this track, Growth, stood out as a track with a great bass tone that I might want to keep as a go-to with a fresh string sound. Luckily, I had the effects chain saved from when I recorded it, and after a bit of tweaking and updates, I arrived at this, the PH Growth bass chain. This chain has a parallel affected and DI channels, each with their volume mapped to a macro. The DI chain is completely dry save for a subtle compressor to catch any peaks. The affected chain has a tuner first, of course, then a compressor to quickly catch any harsh peaks. A subtle saturator with the dry wet knob mapped to a macro, a bass amp, a flanger, again with the dry wet mapped to a macro, 2 more compressors, one to bring up a bit of the low end, and another one to add some punch and articulation. An EQ that rolls off the very low end of the bass, and with 2 macro mapped bands, a low shelved to boost or tone down the low end, and a slight bump to give a bit of gain to a chosen mid or high frequency band. And finally, a utility to give a slight volume boost and to keep the signal in mono. I've tweaked some of the macros to save a few presets, so let's hear them. Now, normally on a bass chain, I like to have some sidechain compression mapped to the low end and the mallet hits of a kick drum. I use Wave's C6 multiband compression to achieve this. If you have that plugin or a similar one, I recommend plugging it in towards the end of the chain to lock your bass and kick drum together. So there you go. If you'd like to use this effects chain in your own workflow, then you're in luck. I've included a link down in the description to download it. It should work in Ableton Live 11 or later, although when I'm filming this, Live 12 hasn't come out yet, but if it has, it should work in Live 12 as far as I'm aware. But if you're using an earlier edition of Ableton, or if you don't feel like downloading the file, everything you need to set it up yourself should be here in this video. Just copy the screenshots that I've showed you and set it up yourself. I think that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to check out another bass tone of mine, then there's a video over here that you can check out and you might enjoy. Subscribe for more music and production videos, and I'll see you in the next one.